Hello and welcome back to my Tony Hawk's Pro Skater review marathon, where today we're going to be taking a look at the second game released in the series, with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for the PS1. The first game gave us such a good basis to be expanded upon by a sequel, so now the sequel's here. How does it compare? To say that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 became a cultural phenomenon is an understatement. Not only did everyone and their mums play the game, but it single-handedly brought the actual culture and sport of skateboarding into the spotlight. What was once quite a niche extreme sport suddenly exploded into the mainstream, and while this isn't entirely due to the release of Pro Skater, it's impossible to deny that it didn't have a huge impact in popularising the sport and brought the music, the athleticism, and the culture of skateboarding to the masses. So obviously, a sequel was on the cards from the get-go, but Neversoft, the original developers of the Pro Skater games, weren't just going to churn out another sequel with a few new levels. They were going to expand on every single element that made the first game so good and cement themselves, and Pro Skater, as a household name. Upon starting the game, we once again get a live-action intro showing the skaters pulling off insane tricks while Rage Against the Machine blasts out and sets the tone for the rest of the game. Unlike the previous game, we now have the ability to create our own skater, which is one of the single greatest additions to the series, because it's now not just a matter of controlling a pro skater within the game, but we ourselves can be a character in the game, which sends out a great message to the people playing, because it's basically saying that anyone can be a skater if you commit to it. Which brings me to a new segment of these Tony Hawk videos called Created Skater or Real Skater. So the way this works is that on the screen now you're going to see a side-by-side shot of me in real life and me in the game, and you simply have to say down in the comments if you can tell which one is which. With this being a PS1 game, it might be easier to tell which one is the real me, but later in the series, it's bound to get more difficult. Even so, I imagine that some people are going to get thrown off with this. Getting back to the game now, the next thing we're going to take a look at is the returning career mode, which is the main single player mode of the game, just like it was in Pro Skater 1. The beauty of Pro Skater 2 is that it doesn't change too much about the core gameplay of the first game, but it layers a ton of stuff on top of that initial experience. So once again we select a skater, enter the first level, and are given a list of objectives to complete. While in Pro Skater 1 these objectives were all the same for each level, in Pro Skater 2 you're gonna find not only some repeated objectives which remain consistent through all of the levels, but also some completely unique objectives too. This is amazing and makes each level feel much more expanded than what was seen in the first game. Plus, not only are the quality of these objectives better, but there's also way more of them, resulting in Pro Skater 2 being much longer than the first game, so you're getting much more bang for your buck. I do still think that the objectives could potentially be a little bit more distinct in each level, because the unique objectives normally just consist of doing a certain trick in a certain area. Like for example grinding the subway rails in New York City or kickflipping TC's roof gap in School 2. But I can't complain too much because the game never felt repetitive in this area. Another major element added into Pro Skater 2 is a brand new collectible in the form of floating cash. There's loads of these dotted around the levels, and finding all of them is required to 100% the game. The major thing I love about these though is that they heavily incentivize exploration. And this is awesome, because unlike in the first game, the levels normally have a rarely hidden secret area that greatly expands the size of the level you're on. For example, in Marseille, you can destroy a section of a fence and head down into the sewers. Or in Skate Street, you can grind this rail to open up some gates which lead to an outdoor section which was previously blocked off. I absolutely loved how the levels felt so dynamic because of this, and you not only feel satisfaction from finding the areas because they offer a new place to do more tricks, but also because there's always cash hidden there too. The cash system also replaces the tape collectibles from Pro Skater 1. So instead of getting tapes for completing objectives, you'll get a certain amount of cash, and you can spend this in the skate shop menu on new decks, upgrading your stats, or buying new tricks. Purchasing new decks is much the same as it was in the first game, really. Each character has a number of unique decks they can buy, which when unlocked can be used by any other skaters too. The stat upgrading is now much better, and rather than it just automatically upgrading your stats like in the first game, you can actually now choose what stat you want to upgrade and by how much. Plus, there's way more stat areas to upgrade here as well, so this system is much more in-depth and customizable, which is a fantastic improvement. The trick purchasing is brand new to this game and allows you to customize what button inputs do what tricks, with the more complicated tricks giving you more score needing to be purchased with the cash you collect. The knock-on effect that this has is that you can also now see all of your tricks listed in a big menu, rather than like in the first game where you weren't told how to perform certain special tricks. So yeah, I absolutely love this cash system. Not only is it rewarding earning the cash by doing the objectives in the game, but also having it as a collectible within the levels to incentivize exploration, and then having a ton of things to spend the cash on. It's perfect, and a huge improvement to the first game. Speaking of huge improvements, the best thing this game adds to the Tony Hawk gameplay is the ability to manual. This is such a simple move. All you need to do is press up and down, or down and up, on the D-pad and you'll enter a manual, which is where you'll move the board onto your rear or front two wheels. And then you'll have to move a balance meter to keep yourself from bailing. This on its own is useless really, but when it's used in combos, it's an absolute game-changing mechanic. In the first game, your combos were limited because you could only do so many tricks on a rail before the rail ended, right? But now, if a rail ends, you can jump and manual just before you hit the floor to continue the combo and balance your way over to another rail or even up to a vert ramp and continue your combo, allowing you to get much higher scores than what was possible in the first game. With this mechanic, the high score objectives have been altered to require much greater scores, so don't expect this to make the game a cakewalk. It still can be reasonably difficult. And there's even now a new score objective called 6 score, which is far beyond what you could get without mastering the manual. Obviously, this addition to the game is incredible. However, there's still no way to continue a combo after landing from a vert ramp. If only they would have added in some kind of move to allow you to do this, then theoretically your combos would never need to end, no matter what trick you were doing. A small change made that ends up having a massive impact on the flow of the game is the ability to button mash when you bail, which speeds up the animation of your skater getting back onto the board. In Pro Skater 1, this felt like it took forever and really broke the flow of the game by having you basically have to sit and do nothing after every bail. Now though, the fast-paced gameplay is maintained by having you still have to do something even after a bail. It's one of those things, just like with the manuals, that makes Pro Skater 1 feel a little bit empty, because these mechanics just feel so natural and fit so perfectly into the game that it's a little bit weird not having them there. As I've previously mentioned, the levels in Pro Skater 2 feel much more expanded and dynamic. But even ignoring the secret areas and interactive elements, like how you can turn this fountain off in Philadelphia, which turns it into a bowl, just the base levels are really great. I would probably say that this game features the most iconic Tony Hawk level in the entire series, this being School 2. But even outside of that, you've got other classics like Hangar, Venice, and even the levels that are a bit less well known, like Bullring, are pretty damn great. The level design in the second game I would say is better than in the first game, and this is probably due to the fact that more of the ramps and rails are designed with the manual in mind, allowing you to easily move from object to object, creating some impressive lines that go around the entire map sometimes. Just like the first game, the soundtrack here is fantastic, even better than what it was in Pro Skater 1 in fact, featuring not only punk rock, but also some hip hop too, to give it a little bit more flavour. My favourite tracks are probably Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine, Cyclone by Dub Pistols, and You by Bad Religion. But once again, the entire soundtrack is amazing, and meshes together seamlessly with the gameplay. There's so many improvements this game makes to the original that it's honestly insane. But yet another one I want to talk about is that the game just feels so much better. While the controls are the same on a fundamental level, like it's still square to flip trick, circle to grab trick, and triangle to grind, the general movement feels so much smoother. You turn slightly faster on the spot, you pick up speed much quicker from a standstill, and the frame rate is more consistent, and the game just feels far less stuttery. Stuff like going from a flip trick to a grab while on a vert ramp feels much better, because in Pro Skater 1 it was kinda like you had to wait for the previous animation to finish before you could press a new combination. But now, that isn't a problem. The only area with this where I still found myself having a little bit of trouble was that sometimes entering a manual didn't work, and this can result in ending combos prematurely despite pressing the right buttons. And sometimes pressing the buttons to jump into a flip trick too quickly will result in the game not picking up the input for the flip trick, which just results in you awkwardly jumping without doing a trick. Still though, they really did an impressive job with smoothing out the rough edges from the first game. The game is also slightly improved graphically. Rather than having a fog effect to make it so you don't see things loading into the distance, they simply opted to show things loading in, and while this isn't ideal, it does end up looking better than the fog used in the first game. The UI is now much cleaner looking too, and the overall character model and environment detail just looks slightly better. This is an example of a sequel that is better than the original game in every single way. I don't think there's one element of the original game that's better. I suppose the only thing you might disagree with is if you preferred a level from the first game, but that's kinda subjective and down to individual taste. They even got rid of the downhill levels in Pro Skater 2, and even though I didn't mind them in the first game, I definitely prefer the open levels, so even that was a fantastic change. Getting 100% as a single character requires you to do every objective, get all 3 gold medals in the returning competition levels, and get all of the cash collectibles in each level too. By doing this, not only will you be able to max out your character's stats, but you'll also unlock a Bales video and a Pro Skater video for your particular skater too. In the first game you unlocked Officer Dick as a playable character by doing this, and I'm happy to report that you also unlock a new character in Pro Skater 2. Only, just like everything else Pro Skater 2 does, the unlockable character here is much better than in the first game. And this secret character is... frickin' Spider-Man! That's just amazing. He has his own special tricks where he uses his webs and everything. What an awesome reward for getting 100%. The reason that Spider-Man is in this game is most likely due to the fact that Neversoft, the developers of the Tony Hawk games, also developed the Spider-Man games on the PS1, so I imagine that by using the newfound contacts at Marvel, they're able to get the license to be able to do this. Fans of Officer Dick need not worry though, because you can actually unlock him too. But to do so, you apparently need to get true 100% completion by fully completing the game as every single character, which is pretty damn insane. There's a total of 14 characters, including Spider-Man, and there's even another unlockable character in the form of Private Carrera, making a return from Pro Skater 1, who you unlock in Pro Skater 2 by doing all of the gaps in every level. Which is really cool, and another thing adding a ton of replayability. So, if you need to complete the game with even the extra characters to unlock Officer Dick, that's 15 times you'll need to finish it, which is asking for a little bit too much in my opinion. Each time you complete the game you unlock a new cheat, which is great for incentivizing repeat playthroughs even more than the unlockable characters and videos do, but even so, that is a lot of time you'll need to spend playing the game if you want to get everything. What makes this even more insane is that this isn't the only thing you're locked out of until you get 100%. To unlock the 2 secret levels featured in Pro Skater 2, you also need to 100% the game as every single character, meaning that there's actually a pretty significant amount of content you're locked out of until you get 100%, and there's no way I'm spending all of that time doing that for this video. It would take me about a week of solidly playing it to do that. While I really appreciate that there's a completion reward and that there's consistent rewards for finishing the game as every character, I kinda think that maybe I should have unlocked the secret stages and characters before unlocking the cheat codes. I'm assuming that there aren't many people out there who unlocked everything legitimately in this game, because it really is a bit too much asking you to do that. After finishing career mode, you might think there's not a lot left to do, but this game actually offers some additional modes to keep your fingers and thumbs busy for even longer. Firstly, we have the returning free skate and single session modes, which are nice to have to explore the levels and see how high you can get your score. Then we have the multiplayer mode, which not only has all of the returning game types from the first game, these being Trick Attack, Graffiti and Horse, but there's also a new mode in the form of Tag, which, as you would expect, is just the schoolground game by the same name, only, you know, while skating. The way that this works is that you start playing, and after the first 10 seconds, one of you are designated as It. The person who's It needs to hit into the other player and is shown their location with an arrow on their screen. The longer a player is It for, the more their counter ticks down, and if it reaches 0, they lose. Overall, this is a great game mode, and it adds a little bit of variety to the game modes that exist in the first game. There's also now a multiplayer free skate mode too, which was strangely absent from the first game, and is useful for showing a friend the layout of a level before you properly compete, or to show them the ropes in a friendly environment if they've never played it before. Just like with the first game, I wouldn't be surprised if some people only played the multiplayer element of this game because it's just that good. That isn't all though. A new addition to Pro Skater 2 is the Park Creator, where you can create your own parks. I mean, the idea is kind of in the name. I went into this expecting it to be a bit dated and clunky, and while you probably can't make anything anywhere near the same level as the stages in the actual game, I still was left very impressed with the depth here. There's a ton of rails, ramps, bowls, and even decorative stuff like signs and trees, and just all sorts to mess around with here. You can change the height of things to give your levels more verticality, and you can even name your parks and change the theme of the level to 4 set environments. They even went as far as to let you place custom markers for where you'll start if you're playing Horse. It's actually pretty damn good, and if you want inspiration, there's even a selection of pre-made maps you can play in. This isn't only a great mode to test out your creativity, but it ultimately would have meant you had infinite levels to play, because you and your friends could have kept making new ones and shared them with each other via memory cards. I would imagine that some people got really into this and made some insanely good parks, but I'm not that great with level editor stuff, so my park is kinda lame. What a fantastic addition to the game though, and something which was way ahead of its time. And after all that, if you still want more content, then there's a demo of Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX hidden away in the menu for you to try out. Geez, the additional content here, the extra number of playable skaters, having more songs in its soundtrack, the refined controls, the better graphics, and everything else, easily make this one of the best PS1 games ever made. They threw absolutely everything they had at the wall, and somehow it all stuck. It's an extremely impressive game. If I'm forced to talk about the negative aspects of the game though, I can point out quite a few things. Firstly, it's really weird how there's a balance meter for manuals and lip tricks, which by the way are another thing this game adds that wasn't in the original. But for grinds, you still have to use the character's animation to balance, rather than a meter. The big drop mechanic, where if you jump from a height you'll bail unless you press X just as you land, is a little bit pointless and kinda just gets in the way. And a few very specific objectives were quite unobvious as to how you were supposed to complete them. Like with this one in Venice Beach where it says to grind a ledge, but the level is filled with ledges. How am I supposed to know which one it's talking about? I spent ages just grinding every ledge until I came across the right one. And while it does have graffiti on it telling you it's this one, if you don't see that, then it's just a little bit frustrating. There's also the thing I said earlier with how the manuals and flip tricks sometimes don't register even if you press the button combinations to do them. And I do think the game should have unlocked the extra characters and secret levels before unlocking the cheats. It also might have been interesting to have had the game reverse the level selection every time you play it as a new character, so that you're required to get higher scores on the first levels. Because it's a bit weird how you're never required to do very well in Hangar or any of the early levels, despite quite clearly being able to. But really, these are all quite minor issues. What a sequel to this game would need to do is not only iron out these issues, but improve the base gameplay, somehow have better levels, and have more variety in objectives too. Not only that, but it'll need to look a lot better and run a lot more consistently too. But will they be able to pull that off? What I love about this game is not only the fact that it's so good for its gameplay, but I love the touches the developers put in to show that they had a great time making it too. All you need to do is look at the last bit of the credits to know that they were having a blast here. When I saw all of these messages, it did get a good chuckle out of me. It's probably pretty obvious, but I'm putting Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 above Pro Skater 1 on my series ranking. Neversoft were on a roll, improving on literally every single element of the first game, while also expanding the game in massive unexpected ways too, like with the inclusion of a park editor. It's one of the best game sequels ever made in my opinion, and it definitely deserves every bit of recognition that it got. And that's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. It would be a difficult task to make a game that's even better than this, but just around the corner was a new console generation, and with it, an opportunity to hit the ground running with a sequel that surpasses all expectations. But would Neversoft be up for the challenge? Well, you'll have to join me for the next video in my Tony Hawk's Pro Skater marathon, where we'll be taking a look at Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 for the PS2. Until then, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe to see more stuff like this coming soon, and leave a comment down below letting me know if you played Pro Skater 2 back in the day and what impact it had on you. And until the next video, bye!